We talked with Mr. Richard Sanchez, who'd gone to high school with Emma and was one of many people totally impressed with her brilliance and her charisma. And he told us wonderful stories, among them giving us something to have a context for understanding her political involvement. He said there was such desperation. There were so many people saying, we have to do something to change the way things are. Somebody has to listen to the Mexican-American population. And the way he put it, he said, we had to look around to find a political party that would listen to us. So she decided to check out the Communist Party, and I decided to check out the Republicans. And this was kind of the sentiment that we were getting from the time period when people were looking for an alternative to an establishment that pretty much took the Mexican-American worker population for granted. As we were in the process of researching for this book, we ran into countless young people who came to us wanting to know more about Emma, saying, I want to write my research paper on her. I want to write a poem about her. I want to know more about this woman. And we realized what a hunger there was among young people. And it seemed ironic because she did so much of her organizing as a very, very young person, as a teenager much of the time. And so we were so impressed by this hunger from youth to know more about this woman. I looked at the books that were out about Latinos at that time, and they were by and large about movie actors, singers, and that was it. There were a few books out, beginning to be out when we first started talking about this, about Cesar Chavez, aimed at young people. But there was very little about Latino leaders. There was even less out there about Mexican-American women. And like I say, most of the Mexican-American women being featured were in the entertainment industry. Our young women were really hungry to know that there was a leader there that was smart and committed and courageous and really putting the community first. So that was a big deciding point for us in putting our energy into a children's picture book. Now, I did ask Cheryl, how are we going to broach these serious topics? We're talking about starvation, we're talking about strike, we're talking about injustice, we're talking about racism. And we said, well, children live in a world that has all of that in it. And they do ask questions about it. They see it, and they ask questions about it. So we began to approach the idea of how do you deal with this for young children? Our decision was to not leave out the important stuff, to not leave out the fact that she was hated by some for what she did. And our decision was also to focus on a concept that young children do understand, and that is, that's not fair. That's not fair. And this is very typical of very bright young children. They're always asking about injustice. But the focus of this is not somebody just saying, that's not fair for me. The focus of this is a young, courageous woman who says, that's not fair for them. Why are you doing this to them? So this was, we felt, a very worthwhile, a very powerful story to tell to the young. Also, the fact that Emma had been a teacher of the very young for many years and had a strong, strong compassion and commitment to children made us feel that the first book out should be the children's picture book. The people that she had spent most of her life trying to work with, trying to answer questions for, trying to empower.
You know, I teach in a high school, at Brackenridge High School. I teach the advanced art classes there. And I have 2 Art 1 classes. And I'm amazed it's 2008, and I'm amazed at how many young Chicanas, they see their future as just raising kids. And there's nothing wrong with that, except at the age of 15, they're coming to school pregnant and then dropping out. And I'm glad this came out on the elementary level, because this book needs to be put in elementary schools with little kinders and first graders, and kindergarten teachers need to say, look what you can become. This is what all of you need to strive for, to become educated, to do for your community, to stand up for what you believe in. And I think that as a role model for young girls before they come into high school, to stress that there's more in life than having your family right then and there at the age of 14, 15. It's amazing how many pregnant Chicanas I have at my school. And it's like commonplace. And I asked them, who is your role model? And a lot of my girls don't have them. And there's never before in the history of the United States has there been so many Chicana, Latina role models for these kids. So why don't they know about it? So this book, I'm hoping, and the books that follow, will become, hopefully, repeated to these young girls, that there are role models out there. There's other paths to take. So never before, I think, for our community have people like Emma Tenayuca been needed to stress there are other paths in the world that we need to follow. Your education, community, serving your community, serving your family, and changing the world. Yes, changing the world.
Some people think that Emma was actually a worker, but the way she began helping or organizing was when she was, I believe, a senior in high school. The women, mostly women, who were workers at the Fink Cigar Company, had walked out in protest of a new practice. The women rolled the cigars by hand, and they were paid by the piece. And they were told one day that certain of their product was not going to be accepted. They would still keep them, but they were only going to be paid, like, these are too small, or these aren't rolled tight enough, so we're only going to pay you for these, and these are just, rejects, which we'll keep anyway. And they were so indignant because, one, it was an under-the-table wage cut, and two, it was kind of an insulting their intelligence, because it was like they didn't know they were cutting their wages by this new practice of rejecting some of the pieces they're only paying them. So anyway, they just walked out on a strike, and the strike made the newspapers, and Emma had read about it, and there was a picture in the papers of the sheriff who had his feet up on the desk, and there was a pair of very shiny black boots, as she remembered it. And the sheriff was quoted as saying, if those women didn't get off the picket line and get back to their jobs, these boots would greet these women. And she just thought the idea of kicking women, she was so indignant that she just went out in sympathy and went out on the picket line with the Fink Cigar women marching. Well, they arrested the women and they arrested Emma, and her first experience in striking was her first arrest. And she said that she learned from that you don't just walk out on a strike, that you have to prepare. You have to prepare for what you do afterwards, and you have to prepare before. And she said after that, it was learned that she had a talent for organizing. She was already a debate team member in high school, and so she was a gifted debater and speaker. She said she worked on her Spanish so that she could write leaflets in Spanish and English. And she was really groomed, and she really worked on organizing. But that was her entree into organizing. The ACLU got started in Texas because of the pecan sheller strike. I believe Maury Maverick called them because of what was going on in San Antonio, and they credit the pecan sheller strike and Emma as their basis, their foundation here in Texas.
The crowd had gathered outside and was at such a level of noise and anger that you couldn't hear anything inside. And so Emma thought maybe if she sang the national anthem, that would make everybody happy and they would realize that these are not people that are against America, but people that are trying to further the democracy in America. We're just trying a different political party to do it. And of course the crowd outside took that as an insult instead of being convinced that this was part of her patriotism. They thought, no, it's our anthem, it's not your anthem. And so they stormed into the building, came through the windows, just absolutely took over. The police had been prepared well enough, and they whisked Emma and Homer, her husband, out through secret tunnels under the municipal auditorium and got them to safety. That wasn't the end of the night's events, because when you get anger together in a mob, that anger has to go someplace. It has to do something. And the mob kept going. The Ku Klux Klan was involved. We've talked to witnesses who were children at the time, who saw for the first time in their lives hooded Klan members and never really knew who they were until years later when they said, oh, that's who those guys are.
Fortunately, they whisked Emma and the other people in that meeting room off to safety. I don't know what would have happened if the municipal auditorium hadn't been designed the way it was, so it had a secret corridor, so they didn't have to go outside. They were whisked away inside through a corridor underneath, I think, before the mob got inside. And once they were inside and they couldn't find the meeting or the people who were there, and they couldn't find Maury Maverick, they just took their anger out on the building. you.